Creating a fictional world is one of the most creatively liberating things you can do. Thinking up the culture, the characters, the relationships, the folklore, everything that makes a setting breathe, everything that makes it feel alive. Fleshing out that world is so satisfying, putting so many moving parts into motion and making something bigger than yourself. It's one thing to make a world come to life, but it's quite another to watch it die.
I want to be seen. The monkey's finger curse. The surfboard's gone weary, but they cannot hear me over this dulcet swirl.
This video is dedicated to Starbuck. She was an incredible cat, and I'm eternally grateful that she chose me over so many others to open up to. In addition, this video will contain major spoilers for Hollow Knight and Subnautica, as well as minor spoilers for Half-Life 2 and Five Nights at Freddy's World. Post-apocalyptic worlds are simultaneously some of the most fascinating pieces of fiction and the most tragic. Some carry the weight of horrible things in the world's past, the pressing hopelessness of decaying creation. Others carry the promise of new beginnings, the chance to start over. Others don't seem to be post-apocalyptic at all, either by being set so far in the future that it doesn't matter, like the fantasy novel The Sword of Shannara, by showing a narrow slice of the devastated world, like Subnautica, believe me, we'll get to that, or sometimes both, like in Portal 2, where you sleep for untold thousands of years only to spend the whole game in an underground facility completely cut off from the world. The trope of post-apocalyptic worlds, like most things, is seen in the public consciousness as defined by its most popular users, whether that be Mad Max on the big screen or the Fallout series on the video gaming consoles. Those examples paint a very bleak picture, wastelands littered with scavengers barely clinging to life. That image that pops into your head is completely unfair to the genre. Apocalypses come in all shapes and sizes, from big booms to little critters. And that right there seems like a perfect segue into what I think is the perfect post-apocalyptic world. And that world is the Kingdom of Hallownest, from the peak gaming experience known as Hollow Knight. To protect the vessel, the dreamers lay sleeping. Through their devotion, Hallownest lasts eternal. Yeah, all the death here is about as eternal as it gets. Hollow Knight might not be the antithesis of my earlier point, but there's a reason the trope of scattered scavengers became a staple. The largest settlements left standing after the infection ravaged the Pale King's domain are Mantis Village and Dirtmouth, the former having hardened their warlike tendencies against the infection, and the latter slowly dying, simply the last light to go out. The fact that Dirtmouth is still standing, though, means something strange when it comes to Hollow Knight's timeline. The game's chronology is in a very specific situation. It's not so soon after Patient Zero that you see the fall of the kingdom, but it's soon enough that some remain who lived through its prime, like Dung Defender. Even the White Lady is still kicking, the former queen of Hallownest herself. The truly unique thing about what the setting allows is that those who remember the kingdom have unimaginably longer lifespans than the common bugs you find. A good way to illustrate this, I find, is with an example. There's one bug who takes his residence in the City of Tears, the derelict capital of Hallownest. He collects relics of times long gone, idols of the Pale King, arcane eggs from a kingdom even before the time of the Worm. He does all this, not knowing of the existence of those who know more about the kingdom's past, like Bardoon or the aforementioned Dung Defender. Lem will live and die before the last of the old guard age a day in human years. You Hollow Knight nitpickers in the audience might be crying out my way with an objection.
Hollow Knight takes place an undefined amount of time from the Pale King's fall. For all you know, it could have been 6 months and the lesser bugs just age fast.
Well then, moving back to the City of Tears, look at this. What is that ragged substance hanging from the ceilings? It's not some torn banners or cloth. They litter the royal waterways as well, and who puts up banners in the sewers? No, this is some kind of moss or buildup. Even with the near constant moisture, it's nonsense to assume that this amount of growth happened in mere months. It has been a long time since the fall of Hallownest. To measure the time since the apocalypse, I have created an entirely original system that I have not utilized previous assets for. This is the Apocalypse Timescale. This nifty thing determines how far the media takes place from the source of the apocalypse, and in theory should coordinate with how many people are around to remember the world before. In practice, however, Hollow Knight breaks this scale. Come on, I just made that. On the marvelous, flawless scale, Hollow Knight would take place about here in my professional opinion, but the moss thing was just one way to look at it. Anyone could bring in any interpretation because it's never stated concretely in-game. It could be 6 months or 600 years. It's all up to the observer to deduce for themselves. Now normally that ticks me off, just leaving something seemingly major up in the air like that. The operative word there is seemingly though. In all reality, it doesn't matter how long it's been since the moth looked down at a little bug kingdom and said to itself, "Yes, oh, that one." All that matters is that it happened, and now you have to save the day. The only way the time of death becomes relevant is if you're over-examining the game to be a pedantic little prick in a YouTube video. I should move on. Subnautica! Calm down. Subnautica, for those who haven't played it, is a survival game in which you use a ton of futuristic tech to catch fish, scan other bits of futuristic tech, and evade some more fish. Doesn't sound very apocalyptic, does it? Well, that's the thing. For all it does so incredibly well, Subnautica is spotty as an apocalypse narrative. On the surface, pun intended, it does seem a bit similar to Hollow Knight. A godlike force descends upon an unwitting world and releases a blight upon it, infecting all but a small portion of all residents. An undefined amount of time later, you show up, with varying degrees of bombasticness, as a silent protagonist, the sole holder of the power to save the day and cure the infection once and for all. So, just a bit similar, yeah. That's all well and good, but peering just beneath the surface, all seems well enough. Little fishies swim all about the crater, which makes up the entire playable map, giving the impression at first that nothing is wrong at all. In Hollow Knight, you can't miss the fact that the world has been decimated because it's still decrepit, a moldering corpse of a kingdom. Subnautica, in comparison, looks downright cheery. I will say, though, one thing Subnautica has over Hollow Knight is isolation. All throughout Hallownest, there are some survivors of the infection, some offering advice, some companionship, and some a swift death. In Subnautica, the only thing you have is your PDA, offering the occasional pre-typed one-liner. In fact, the PDA even tells you,
"After weeks without human contact, it is normal to experience psychological discomfort. Research indicates symptoms may be partly alleviated by adopting a pet or anthropomorphizing an inanimate object."
Yeah, even the AI knows you're cooked. You do hear other voices throughout your journey, but only distress signals from the radio leading to empty pods and recordings on other people's PDAs left behind from one crash or another. Either way, they're both echoes of those long past, nothing physical. They offer no reprieve from the fact that you are the sole survivor. One aspect that I honestly think is a toss-up between the two is the atmosphere of the ancient wonders the games hold. Hollow Knight has both the derelict structures from the Pale King's reign and the much older artifacts of what has been commonly dubbed the Void Kingdom, the first harnessers of soul and the creators of most of the soul totems you use throughout the game. Subnautica has the intimidating structures and technologies of the Precursors, as they were known before Below Zero came around. Both can tower above you, inspiring awe through scale, although in my opinion Subnautica does that better for the dual reasons of Subnautica being a 3D game and inherently carrying more immersion because of it, as well as Hollow Knight's limited side-scrolling camera not being able to capture that much at once. The variety Hollow Knight has wins out for me though. The Stone Sanctuary, Soul Sanctum, Crystallized Mound, Teacher's Archives, the Abyss, the White Palace, all with unique and beautiful aesthetics. The Precursor Facility aesthetic is one of my favorite looks to ever exist in anything ever, I mean look at it, but one repetitive theme will never beat the variety for me. It's the same reason the Divine Beasts pale in comparison to the dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom, despite the latter's shortcomings. Yes, I like the Divine Beast aesthetic, sue me. While Subnautica and Hollow Knight have their differences, so far each have come out about even. Superficial wellness, isolation, lack of variety, raw as hell precursor aesthetic. At this point, you may wonder why I'm placing it on such a lower peg compared to Hollow Knight. Well, the key to that explanation lies with our third exhibit. A game with, in my opinion, a perfect show of apocalyptic gameplay. Half-Life 2 is considered by many as one of the greatest games ever made, for a variety of reasons. Its physics engine was revolutionary, its textures were impeccable, its narrative drove an entire generation to the brink, but who boys the narrative another video? No, what I'm interested in is... Editor, rewind about 30 seconds for me? Yeah, that. The apocalypse of the Half-Life world is centered around the Combine takeover of Earth, and Gordon Freeman's quest to, stop that. I would give more context, but if I don't stop myself, the next hour will be spent ranting about Half-Life 2's impact on the gaming sphere, a topic that's been talked to death, so I'll fast forward to, that one. The game's gunplay is very believable for the scenario you find yourself in. You get each weapon from a source that isn't just, because you need it to have fun. You get your crowbar from Barney, who picked it up on the way out of Black Mesa. You get your pistol from a Metro cop during your escape from City 17. You even get to use alien tech from the Combine when you picked it off freshly dead soldiers. The areas where those guns are most useful also factor into the believability of the world. The enemies use real-world tactics to try and flush you out of cover, and you have to think about how to fight back as if you were really there, really fighting for the future of humanity. The gameplay loops back on the world. This principle is present throughout the whole game, but limiting it to a microcosm like the gunplay shows the concept a little more concisely. Subnautica doesn't really use its gameplay to factor into the apocalypse narrative. You're using futuristic technology to explore a lush world, interacting with the plot through the alien structures I talked about before, completely cut off from the world at large in most cases, whether through location, tone, threats, the lack thereof, or a grab bag of those traits. Hollow Knight doesn't use its gameplay directly to enhance the believability of its setting like Half-Life 2, but it does do so indirectly. The upgrades you obtain throughout the game are some of the only remnants of beings and machines dead and dying. You gain the Desolate Dive by killing the husk of the Soul Master. The spell's upgrade, Descending Dark, is obtained by cracking open a crystal with a snail shaman in it, presumably already dead, but frozen in time. You pick up the Mothwing cloak off your own dead sibling's corpse, for crying out loud. Thinking about the things you come across in this game invites very uncomfortable explanations, much like Half-Life 2. Thinking for 2 seconds about the life of a stalker, or even an average citizen under the Combine, is enough to make blood curdle. This is one thing Subnautica didn't grasp about telling an apocalypse story. You don't have any emotional attachment to anything on the planet short of the Sea Emperor and your cuttlefish, but the former doesn't show up until very late in the game, and the latter wasn't even born until you came around. Hearing tales from the spirits of the fallen in Hollow Knight brings sadness, perhaps melancholy. Seeing the plight of the human race in Half-Life 2 fuels your thirst for revolution. Oddly though, reading the logs of the precursors in Subnautica only brings curiosity, fascination. You want to learn more, you're still engaged, but you're not invested in stopping the infection because it hurt so many others. You're invested because it's hurting you. Learning the story of how it came to be is just a side quest, especially since you don't get to see how it decimated the rest of the planet. Hollow Knight shows you the consequences of the apocalypse. Half-Life 2 makes you live through it, and Subnautica... What was that? Do you know who did this Freddy Fazbear from the official Five Nights at Freddy's coloring book?
Oh, he went that way.
Thank you, Mr. Fazballs.
Alright, I don't think he suspected my identity as hit YouTuber TheDapperWaffle. I've been listening in through the wall, and I realized something. FNaF World is secretly an apocalypse game. Think about it. There's only one real settlement with houses. All the other animatronics are spread out everywhere, scavenging what they can. Pinwheel Circus is overrun with monsters. The world doesn't even have a proper name. This is clearly the aftermath of some terrible tragedy that harmed the very fabric of the world. You use glitches in the fabric of space itself to get around, actively abusing the wounds in the world caused by this calamity. I bet if Scott didn't get laughed out of the room as soon as it released, we would have seen the heart of FNaF World's madness. As it stands though, we can still speculate. And from that speculation, my theory is...
Hey!
Uh-oh.
What do you think you're doing with my audience in my video?
Pizza delivery?
Oh, okay. Wait a minute. What kind of pizza delivery guy busts a hole in the wall?
The violent kind.
Oh, okay. Wait just a minute.
The people need to know that FNaF World is secretly post-apocalyptic.
Wait, what?
You heard me!
That game was made in 4 months flat. I highly doubt Scotty C put that much thought into its meta-narrative.
Would you put it past him?
No, but it's still far-fetched at best.
I bet the fractured world was taken over by whatever security was meant to protect. I have a hard time believing it was just Scott protecting himself. What reason would he have as a game dev and benevolent deity to make a whole world and then rip it apart?
What reason would anyone have to make a post-apocalyptic narrative? It's a neat scenario to explore.
But at that point, why not make it impossible to reach him? He just plopped his text behind a funky-looking owl and called it a day.
Like I said, he didn't put that much thought into it. Not every game has hidden layers, and not every game is set after the end of the world.
The words FNaF World has no hidden layers hurt me at my very core.
You know full well what I meant. Get out of my house.
You call this a house? It just sorta stops existing as soon as it's out of frame.
Are you disrespecting my cheese? In my house? On my island?
What?
Go.
Fine.
As it stands, all of our games have some outstanding aspect to them. Hollow Knight is the jack of all trades, utilizing everything incredibly well, but isn't the absolute best at any apocalyptic principles. Subnautica skirts the responsibilities of a true apocalypse narrative in order to be its own thing, for better or for worse. Half-Life 2, on the other end of the scale, goes all in on making you immersed in the end of the world, taking every opportunity to keep you enthralled in the calamity overtaking Earth. FNaF World. Speaking of the scale, Half-Life 2 is finally a game that fits on the scale properly. Wait. Oh god, that depends on whether you count the source as the Resonance Cascade of the 7-Hour War. Oh, why must I be cursed? Well, either way, all three games have something in common, and that's that hope came from the most unlikely of places. Hollow Knight's knight trekked from the abyss on a quest it didn't even understand. Gordon Freecam got placed on a random train by an enigmatic businessman / questionable deity. Subnautica's protagonist literally fell out of the sky. FNaF World. The same principle applies in our world. No matter the predicament you find yourself in, there will always be hope. Even if you don't see it now, keep looking. It might be right there for you, or it might be in the last place you check, but it is there. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you will be alright. You have more people behind you than you think, and you can count me as one of them. The only way you can truly lose hope is to give up, so keep fighting for that hope. You will make it, and we'll be there when you do. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm really sorry about the long wait for this one. I had another video all the way into editing before I caught some crucial misinformation in the script that kinda undermined the point. I hope this one was good enough to keep you on board. I also want to give a massive thanks to TheDapperWaffle for coming on. He's a really cool guy who makes just as cool content, and the naming scheme was too perfect to resist. With that said, subscribing helps a ton. My goal for this year is to reach 5K by Christmas, so every bit helps. I also love to see new people on my Discord server, and my Patreon is open if you're deranged enough. I love you all, and I hope you have an amazing day. Stay tuned.